Hi everyone, it's great to be back with you again. We're starting off some afternoon devotions again between now and Christmas. So I've got 12 devotions on the Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes. We're going to be airing them every Tuesday and Thursday, so I look forward to spending that time with you in the weeks ahead. Now, the Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes is a curious book. If you've read it before, you'll know what I mean. At points it's quite dark, and at times it feels a little cynical. It's quite troubling for Christians to read this book and to be able to make sense of it. So we're going to work through it, and we're going to be able to find, hopefully, what the message of this book is and how it can help us as Christians as we seek to walk with Jesus and love one another. Well, without any further ado, why don't we jump straight in? There are really two characters in this book. There's the narrator and there's the teacher. It's the teacher who does most of the talking, but the book starts in chapter 1, verse 1 with a narrator's comment. Why don't you open to Ecclesiastes chapter 1 and have a look at that with me right now. It begins like this. The narrator says, "These are the words of the teacher, son of David, King of Jerusalem." It's an introductory comment. Now, son of David makes us think of Solomon. But as you read through the book of Ecclesiastes, a lot of the internal descriptions and evidence, the dating of the book, the way the book is written, leads us to believe that this probably wasn't the literal Solomon, but that someone's writing using the persona of Solomon. It makes a lot of sense, really. He was the wisest of all of Israel's king, and this is a book about wisdom. But as he is handed the microphone from the narrator, it's passed to the teacher, he begins with these shocking words. Meaningless. Meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. Your Bible might say vanity or futile. Everything is vain, futile, and meaningless. And it's a little bit of a shock to us. It's not what you expect to read when you open your Bible for a quiet time. Now, before we investigate what it is that he's talking about, I want to show you a little trick when reading your Bible. It's going to help us out here. Often when you check the beginning of a book, you can then go and check the end of a book. And often the bookends of what you're reading will help give shape and help give you some understanding as to what it is, how you should be thinking about the verses that follow. So if we do that, if we flip to the very end of Ecclesiastes, we're going to encounter the narrator a second time. And here the narrator gives us his verdict on the teacher. The reason why I want to start at the end is because with such a provocative opening, meaningless, meaningless, everything is meaningless, we're left scratching our heads. Who is this teacher? Is he depressed? Is he a cynic? Is he about to give up on faith altogether? Well, if we're not sure who it is we're listening to and what it is we should be listening for, then we're going to get ourselves into some trouble. So flip with me to the end of Ecclesiastes, Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 9. What we have here is the conclusion, the summary of the narrator as he reflects back on everything that's been said. And this is what we find. Not only was the teacher wise, says the narrator, but also he imparted knowledge to the people. He pondered and searched out and set in order many proverbs. The teacher searched to find just the right words, and what he wrote was upright and true. You see, according to the narrator, these are not the words of a grumpy, cynical old man, but these are the words of a perceptive man who sees life the way it really is, who has applied godly wisdom to the search for meaning, and has come up with some conclusions that we should listen to, conclusions that we can trust. He goes on in verse 11, "The words of the wise are like goads, their collected sayings like firmly embedded nails given by one shepherd Now, that may not be familiar imagery to us, but a goad was a sharpened stick which was used to keep goats and cows and sheep in line. You'd give them a little bit of a poke to make sure they were headed the right direction. Think about a modern day cattle prod. Well, the narrator says this book of Ecclesiastes is like a cattle prod. It'll give you a zap in the behind. And as it does, you'll get a shock. It'll maybe even create a bit of discomfort. But it's there for your good. It's there to keep you on track. It's there to make sure you're headed in the right direction. He says these words are like firmly embedded nails. So think of two planks of wood with a big, thick builder's nail that's been driven right through them. And it anchors them together. It keeps them firm and in place. It creates a strong foundation. That's what this book of Ecclesiastes will do. And he says that these are words given by one shepherd. That's how he describes the teacher. He's a shepherd. He guides and he protects and he's trustworthy. You see, as we read through the book of Ecclesiastes, don't let some of the more inflammatory things that we read, some of the more unorthodox things that we will come across throw you. These are words you can trust. They're the words of the teacher, but they're God's words to you and to me. People who want to live wise in a world which is so often just so chaotic. Have a look at the very final verse of the entire book, verse 14. Well, verse 13 and 14. Now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. We're going to revisit these verses again on the very last devotion in chapter 12. But for now, just notice this, that the book ends with a reminder that God is judge and he will bring his judgment. And that means that any outlook you have on life, any view of what the good life should be like, if it doesn't take into account the fact that God's judgment is real, then it is the most foolish approach to life you could ever imagine. Wisdom only works. Wisdom is only wise when it takes into account that God is there. His judgment is real. Justice will be served. And there is a day that we have to give an account. That's going to be something helpful to hold on to as we make our way through this curious and wonderful book. Well, now that we know who this teacher is, we've been given the verdict at the end, the conclusion by the narrator. Let's flip back to the start and just spend our last few moments together having a look at how this book begins. Verse 2, chapter 1. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless, everything is meaningless. Well, where do you go from there? It's a pretty depressing beginning to a book of the Bible, wouldn't you say? The word that is rendered in my NIV as meaningless is the Hebrew word hebel. Hebel is a great word. It means fleeting. It means vanity. It means something which has no substance. Think of a cold morning walking outside of your house and as you breathe out and your breath makes those little puffs of steam, as soon as you see it, it vanishes again and there's nothing left. That's Hevel. I'll show you what else Hevel is like. I brought my little spray bottle along today. Now hopefully you can see this on camera, but watch this. That, my friends, is Hevel. It's here one minute, it's gone the next. It's of no substance. It's empty and vapid. Well, the teacher begins his assessment of life in this world by saying, that's what we've got. Meaningless, meaningless, vapid, transitory, without substance, empty. That is what he sees when he looks around. He's not saying that life is without purpose, so we should all go shoot ourselves in the head. What he's saying is that life is frustrating. Because just like I was trying to catch that mist, that's what it's like so often living in this broken, fallen world. It's frustrating. It's not without purpose, but it's incredibly difficult. Now, I think that's something that we all experience. There's a real raw honesty that we get at the beginning of the book of Ecclesiastes. He says, what do people gain from all their labour at which they toil under the sun? Verse 3. There's that phrase, under the sun. Get familiar with it. It's going to be coming up time and time again. Under the sun means that you cannot see what you cannot see, and you cannot know what you cannot know. We live in a closed system. We don't have the mind of God. We can't see beyond this world. We can't know all the things God knows. We literally live under the sun, and we can't see or reach beyond it. And so in this closed system, we are limited. We can't get all the information we want. We can't discern all the meaning that we would love to know. And so this is the reality. We live lives under the sun. And then he gives these three great little illustrations. He says the sun rises and sets, verse 5, and hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south and then to the north, round and round it goes. And then in verse 7, the streams flow to the sea, yet the sea's never full. The sun, the wind, the streams, there's a repetitive nature to life in this world, a cyclical nature. It just goes round and round and round. We never seem to get anywhere. And regardless of how hard you work or how much you know, you cannot control it and you can't alter its course. That is the frustration of hebel. That is why so often we tear our hair out and we say, meaningless, meaningless, what is the point? And that's what this book is going to help us to discern. And it's going to help us to lament, and it's going to help us to engage with those really tricky questions that so often we just put in the too hard basket. But this is a part of the Bible that won't let us do that. It's going to walk with us as we engage with some of life's most perplexing of questions. Well, I wonder, as we've just dipped our toes in the beginning of the book of Ecclesiastes, I wonder if this is at all true to your experience. Do you feel that sometimes life is empty? Do you feel that sometimes it lacks substance, that you get so close to finding what you're looking for, but you never can quite catch it in your fist? Well, if so, the good news is that you're not going crazy. That is life under the sun. And it doesn't mean it's without purpose, and it doesn't mean that God has given up. But what it means is in this broken and fallen world, we must ask hard questions, and we must use wisdom to take us as far as we can go. And I hope you're going to join with me as we continue on this journey together. For next time, won't you read the rest of chapter 1 and chapter 2? And that's where we'll pick it up when we meet again. We'll see you soon.